All right, so welcome to the podcast, Charity. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing good. Good to be here.
Yeah, I was just complimenting you on how cool your setup is, like right before we joined. Like, look at all those colors, everybody. It's fantastic, you know?
You see the little 3D printed honeycomb light?
Yeah, I'd see that. Yeah, that's cool.
I need to I
Nice.
need to get I need to get an extension cord so that it's all lit up,
It's all
but
lit
I
up, yeah.
love it.
Did you custom make that?
I did not custom make that,
Okay, okay.
but one of my coworkers did.
Got it. Yeah. I know a lot of people today are getting into like 3D printing, and I see like all these YouTube videos, and I think my Instagram jam is now like bunch of people making like so many cool things. I think it's amazing. The era we live in today.
I know.
Yeah. Ever wondered if you could go back in time and like drop a 3D printing machine? How
Ha!
it will change human society?
I have not had that particular thought, but now I
That'll be
do.
cool. Yeah. Well, welcome again to the podcast. I hope you're having a great day. For everyone listening in, Charity, why don't you kind of give everyone a little bit of an intro of what you do today, yeah, and your role at Honeycomb and things like that.
Sure. I am the co-founder and CTO of honeycomb.io, the original observability company. I'm also the co-author of database reliability engineering, observability engineering, and today the very last chapters of the second edition went out to tech reviewers. So second edition will be out in, I think Dead Tree edition will be out in June, but chapters will be coming much sooner. So
Nice.
yeah,
Very cool. Yeah. It's awesome. It's an honor to have you on the podcast, actually. And I'll give you the background, okay? And like, it's always great to listen to somebody and say, hey, this is what I do. And it's like, you have to like condense your entire life into like a 15-second intro, which is like completely unfair. But let me tell you my story of Charity Majors, okay? I used to work at a company called DataStax before I joined Cockroach Labs. All right. And you are pretty familiar with it. Yeah, Charity used to work at a company called Parse, which in 2012, 2013, if I don't remember, if I recall correctly, was suddenly became like the poster child of Cassandra. If I'm not
yeah,
wrong, I think is Christine still your co-founder for Honeycomb?
yeah,
Okay, cool.
yeah,
So I think Christine wrote or was behind Parse Analytics, which used
yep,
Cassandra, and I think you
yep.
were at Cassandra 2 or something or 1, and it
I
became like
operated the whole
you did
thing.
that. Yeah, yeah. So I was early on before I joined DataStax was like following Cassandra as a open source database in the at that time, and then I saw that Parse was like one of the babies, and then obviously Cassandra came out of Facebook. Parse got acquired by Facebook, and I think
Yep,
this whole story.
yep.
So
Circle of
and
life.
I would see Charity Majors here and there, and then when I joined DataStax, I mean, I think there was a point where we had a cross section where I read a lot of stuff that you wrote. And I think by the time you had started Honeycomb. So that's my background. And it's so surreal that somebody whose content and blogs and information you read about, you get to talk to
Here
them.
we
So it's
are.
an honor actually.
This is amazing.
I
This is
know,
so
yeah.
fun. Thank you for telling that story. Yeah, no, that parse analytics product in a very real way is responsible for honeycomb and thus
Interesting.
observability because Christine, like we had this whole origin story, right? Christine, the dev, Charity, the ops, you know, Christine single-handedly built parse analytics on top of Cassandra using all the best practices. But when you're using metrics, you have to decide upfront what questions are you going to let people ask. And our parse users kept writing in and being like, but I want to ask this, but why can't I ask this? And Christine would just be like, so frustrating, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And I was on the, anyway, and here
Yeah,
we
I
are.
mean it was an era. I mean, I
It
think
was
like
an era.
it was an era for sure. I mean, I think people I mean, whoever listens to it who remembers this would know how crazy it was. Like I remember I think I read a blog at the time where I think Parse was like blowing up so much that like you had probably a million apps
We
running
had
and
a million mobile apps hosted
mobile
on
apps, yeah.
MongoDB.
Yes.
Literally yesterday on X, the founder of I won't name it, but was tweeting about how the the old way of understanding your software was you read the code. The new way is you read the and I'm just like, in what world did you go? I read the code. I understand what it does. Well, at Parse, at Parse and at Heroku, we were hosting developers' code, so we had to understand it from first principles and instrumentation. We couldn't just go ask the developer what they were trying to do when they shipped it, and that was the whole mindset, and I forget that's not everyone's mindset. The primary debugging tactic that most teams have to this day is, "Who shipped that dev?"
Right, exactly.
Go find them.
Yes.
Ask them what it's supposed to do. Get them to fix it. That's the fastest, and, I'm like, "I haven't been in that mindset for 13 years," you know?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's what it like what you're saying is very interesting because at that time, I don't know where it became true that I think it became a standard in many ways. Everybody was trying to say this is the right standard, the Kubernetes standard, the container standard, the observability standard included logging, metrics,
3
tracing.
pillars, metrics, logs, and traces, well, except for exceptions and errors and every signal type goes to its own siloed storage to this
Yes,
day. But,
exactly.
like
Yeah.
but, like, that I think people don't realize that's not a best practice. That's an artifact of operational infrastructure. You're mostly operating code that you can't change. So you just have to take whatever it emits. If it sends you metrics, you just gotta put it someplace. If it sends you logs, you just gotta put it someplace. And it's shitty, but it's what you got, right? That is not for your crown jewels, for your software, the software that makes you money. That's not what you wanna do. You have power over this code. You should instrument it in a way that does not spray your signals apart, that keeps it together because the context is what makes that data powerful.
Right. Yeah. And I think observability is like has become so much critical. And I do feel with the agent scale at which things are coming, where we are going, it's gonna
Yep.
become way more critical. So I would love to dive into your perspective on all of that in this episode. And for everyone listening, and obviously you see like the small connection that I've had with charity from far. And I was, by the way, this was era. I was not even in the US. I live in the US now. I was in India, and I was would read these things like find it on the internet. And the communities used to be like so weird at the time. We have so much more organized now, so it's great. But before we get to parse, tell us a little bit about young charity and what really excited you to pursue this path, and how did this happen?
I grew up in the backwoods of Idaho. I was homeschooled, um, religious compound, basically. And I got a piano scholarship to college when I was 15 and noped out. I had never used computers. And my first year of college, and I was just like, "Dude, I grew up poor. I am not nope, nope." And, I got a job as a sysadmin, and I've been on call since I was 17, Uh, traded one keyboard for another. But that was an era when you could just get into computers as a
Right.
tinkerer.
So you did that. You worked as a tinkerer. You worked at Parse, and then eventually joined Facebook. Got hit by a completely different scale. Tell us a little bit about how that Parse into Facebook experience was, and how do you got experience with scale and observability and start of everything there.
I had been at Linden Lab during there was a time and place where Facebook seemed like the redheaded stepchild, and like Second Life was seen as like the next big thing, right? So the scale wasn't super unfamiliar to me. I Acquisitions are hard. They're always hard. Like culture clash, they're kind of non-consensual. Like I didn't go to work for Facebook for a reason, and then my company was like, "Ugh, 2-hour bus ride each way." No. There was a lot of culture clash and a lot of things that I was always one of those engineers who didn't care about the business stuff, didn't want to hear about it, didn't give a shit, right? I was the back end infrastructure. And that too, I think, is an era that is passing, and people who feel that way should be mindful that it's not a growth area. I wish I had paid a lot more attention to business outcomes and product development and design and that sort of thing. But we got acquired by Facebook, and a couple years later they shut it down. Um, I left before but ultimately, I will say tough experience, but I'm very grateful to have had it. I've often said I don't think I learned anything new about technology while I was at Facebook. I learned a lot about management, about like, you don't get to be a company that has tens of thousands of people without learning how to operate well.
Right.
That's what I
Yeah.
learned.
Yeah, completely makes sense. And I think, when I was researching also, I've kind of saw that that was your pivot to go from, hey, I need to go learn or figure out what I've done at this company and apply it at another company. And I think those were your beginnings at Honeycomb.
Honestly, you're applying more intention than the
Yeah.
process happened. I left Facebook looking around for the next thing, and I had like, VCs were like, "Would you like so?" I'm like, "Well, I'm not gonna say yeah, sure." Like, as a woman, dropout, queer person, like, this opportunity. Of course, I'll take it. I'll try it. We're definitely gonna fail, but like, it's a fun way to spend a couple years. Ops people don't usually start companies, and VCs don't usually fund them, and for very good and obvious reasons, because we're not optimists. We expect everything to fail. That's not really the outlook that you want in a CEO or a founder. You want the people who are like, this could be $1 billion business someday, and
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
never me, so had to
No,
learn it.
agreed. Yeah, but I think, like, when I was like looking at what Honeycomb has started to do, and I think some of the new content that I'm seeing, it's like so exciting. Like, it's just a different way with which you are looking at observability. I don't even think people get it. So,
No, they don't.
correct. So walk us to what you saw as to, like, what was the problem, and then why you felt like, hey man, we need to do something completely different and
Yeah.
project a different way to help the way the world is going to be. And I think you are like prime now with what's going on with all the AI
We
stuff,
were
so
built
it's
for
very
this.
exciting.
We were built for this
Yeah.
era. We didn't even know it, but we were built for this era. Because what people are struggling with the most right now is not AI or non-determinism or the novel aspects. They're struggling with the software aspects, but it's 10 times as much, 100 times as much, 10 times faster than before, 100 times faster than before, right? Like, their systems have evolved to accept a rate of change like this, right? And it's held together with duct tape and string and stupid human tricks like intuition. And I've been there for 10 years, so I built it so I can guess where the problem is. And as that rate of change ticks up, my orders all the duct tape is flying off the bus. And Honeycomb, you're absolutely right. We are not really descended from the mainstream
The
tools. We're
traditional
just
observability cloth or something. Yeah.
we were the ones who introduced the concept of observability for software, and then it got co-opted by all the other companies. But we had the DNA of Honeycomb is much more like a combination of product analytics, business analytics, and it's just arbitrarily wide structured data blobs that can be hundreds of dimensions wide. That can also be traces, because traces are just structured logs with IDs, and that packs all the context so that you don't have to decide what questions you're going to need to ask in the future at the time that you're storing it. You can make all those decisions at some which is exact what do you need to understand your AI? You need context, speed, and flexibility, the ability to slice and dice and zoom in and zoom out. That's what you need. That's what you need. That's what we built. So it really is. I gave a keynote to our company last month. And like I said, I'm not an optimist. I'm not an early adopter. I've seen hype trends come and go many times in tech. The last few were a bust. So, like, it really wasn't until last fall that I realized, guys, this is our chance. This is our opportunity. This is the moment we've been waiting for. For all of Honeycomb's existence, our our essays, our blogs, our thought leadership have had a lot more reach and influence than our product has. And it's always puzzled me. Why is it people out there who love what we say, love what we write, why don't they then immediately go sign up for the product? Because it's the same thing, right? The product encodes our philosophy. Our philosophy comes from our product. They're the same thing, right? Yet there are people who have been listening, reading our stuff for 10 years who are like, oh, it never occurred to me to try honeycomb, right? Well, I think it's because the delta between where they are and where we're talking about is wide. And it's come across like eat your vegetables. If you want to do it the right way, do this, instrument your code this way, look at your graphs after you all these like test in production, all these things. And now with AI, the it's competitive pressure. It's not us saying eat your vegetables. It's oh shit, we're not going to actually reap any value from our AI investments unless we can build the guardrails so that we encode the knowledge of the system into the system instead of into, intuition and all these other things. So,
You've said some really cool things, and I think, I mean, as I was saying, my point was really like, when I was researching honeycomb, I think the philosophy and the experience that you bring from the even the observability engineer book that you wrote, right, in the second version that's coming, it's so rich in looking at something that everybody thinks is the way you should look at, but you kind of have opened it up in a much more wider way. So the perspective that you were bringing with the AI agents and things like that, if you do you see like the scale at which AI agents are growing is going to just break existing observability?
oh yeah, yeah, the three pillars model, uh, yeah, it doesn't work. This is and this is not just me as a vendor, like, being like, "Right, doesn't." No, we hear this from customers and prospects, like, constantly, like, when we're trying it just doesn't work because that connective tissue, the context, is the most important part of the data, and when you're splitting your signals up into different silos, you're discarding it, right? Data becomes more valuable, with more context, and it becomes not linearly more valuable, it becomes exponentially more valuable, and so when you're like, "We're gonna put the metrics over there, we're gonna put the logs over there, we're gonna put the traces over there," you know, and then, like, I think existing vendors are trying to kind of monkey patch all this by then building bridges between those pillars, which and this is why if you look at sort of like cost, which is most people's entry into they're just like, "Ugh." Cost has been rising 48% per year over year for the past 15 years straight. Like, Gartner printed something, talked about a representative customer of theirs in 2009 was spending $50,000 a year on monitoring observability, and in 2024, they spent $24 million. And it's continuing to go up at that rate, and that's because you're storing the same data again and again and again and again in different formats, and then trying to build bridges between these data types, and the and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Like, it just doesn't work. You want your data to be you can't put Humpty back together again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And so with that, I mean, this is a great segue to the question I wanted to ask is that how is Honeycomb doing it differently compared to these other vendors? Like, would be great to know a little bit of what your vision is and how that has been applied to the product.
It's not rocket science. Like, we're not that smart. Back in 20 years ago, columnar stores, 20 years ago, a couple decades ago, I they became productized for business teams, right? But they were super expensive, so you had to be very selective about what data you would put into that. But that's what powers your sales teams, your marketing teams. You can't again, they couldn't do it if their signals were all spread out. It's really only in software engineering that we're just like, "Ah, I can hack this together." You know? Software engineers are using hand-me-down tools from ops teams who have to use those tools because they can't modify the code, right? But it's a columnar store. It is I will brag a little bit, we do have by far we have the best storage engine in the world for observability workloads. It's the only one that's custom built for observability, which means that we can make we can power, we could power Facebook scale workloads, because it's horizontally partitioned, distributable, and we can like the if you wanna run a query our 95th percentile, I think, query response time is under a second. So it's interactive. It's fast. It's just because one of the problems with the old model is you gotta index and schema and make decisions about what you want to be able to ask fast questions about in the future. Problem is if you can't predict what, the whole but with a column restore, everything is an index, right? And you can pack as much context you want up to like the limit of the number of Linux file handles that can be opened in the system, right? So it's like thousands, right? So there's no penalty, and there's no penalty for cardinality, right? A lot of companies are paying out the nose because high cardinality data is the most identifying data in your system. Unique IDs, names, descriptions, super high cardinality. And most companies are just discarding it because they can't afford to keep it. So just again and again and again, we're built for this.
No, it's very cool. And I mean, we at our company, I was recently talking to our CEO, and we were talking about the world that we anticipate. And I think one of the things that we have started to recognize is that there is a limited amount of power available, and there's a limited amount of data centers available, but we are actually trying to expand on that. What that signals is that there will be more and more people trying to fetch data, read data, write data, do all these different things. And you need to have a way to observe all of this. And so the joke is, where are we going to put these data centers? Obviously, some people say we claim we'll have data centers in the space. maybe
Oh, do they
maybe on the
really?
yeah, I mean that's the whole Elon has been talking about.
I cut out my Elon Musk feed a couple years ago.
Yeah, but regardless of that, I think it's very clear. Like, I recently got to know one of the big data center investments is happening in a port back in India, and like just data centers are exploding everywhere. But I think if you go back to the root of it, is this AI scale that you're talking about. Like, somebody I was talking to recently told me that individual is running 16 agents on 3 or 2 Mac machines.
And this is where I think the interesting questions are less about scale and more about the rate of change.
Right.
I mean, they're both interesting. There's so many, but like the things that really make me lean in and go, "Ooh." I think it's the rate of change.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was asking him, like, so if you're running all these, if you're making all these different changes, and if you're running all these different agents, how are you handling everything else that needs to support it? Like, so I was asking him, what kind of applications is your agents hitting? And he was telling me like 4 of his agents do 4 different tasks, and he has basically broken their context, but hit the same application.
Yeah.
And I was like, how what I was like curious, like, how do you identify them? How does it go into your database? Do you track it anywhere? How are you observing it? Nothing. Like, he's like, no, I'm just, something breaks, I go back and try to fix it. I try to figure it out. So even at a very, very low level, I'm seeing like every small everyday individuals are getting into this, and citizen developers are growing. So what would the impact of that be on, Facebook like companies who might open up a gateway, okay, interact with agents? So, like, of course the scale is there, but obviously the human behavior is changing with respect to agents. So it's very interesting. So I was curious as to what you feel about that. Yeah.
Boy, that's a big what do I feel about the intersection of AI, scale, rate of change, developers, and big companies surfacing agents for us to talk to? David, do
It's
you
a
wanna
loaded
try
question.
and narrow that down
Yeah, yeah,
slightly?
no,
Or
makes
should I
sense.
just riff?
Right, right, yeah. No, my point of view is like, I feel like this will have massive implications to performances, right? And
Ah,
then performance is engineering, and system design will become so much more critical. And you cannot do system design without looking at how to tackle the observability, right?
this
So
is something that occurred to me a couple of weeks ago is right now we are in the process of we are building the first AI native socio-technical systems,
nice.
you know? None of us are AI native like 3 years ago, right? It just came, and now we're starting to build AI natives by looking at, okay, what do we what lessons can there are a lot of analogies to the cloud, you know? I in fact, I wrote a piece on my Substack called something like 2025 was to AI what 2010 was to the cloud, the year that it stopped being a toy and the center of gravity shifted, right? It went from, "Oh, the cloud is a place where we can put our extra workloads," to, "Oh, everything else is legacy." And we need to start building, for the cloud, and so what are the patterns? What are the new patterns, right? What are the new assumptions? What are the architectural details that we all thought were just, like, baseline, that were specific to on-prem environments? And and I think this is really interesting, and to your point exactly, um, I think one of the lessons that we have learned or should have learned, I don't know, one of those 2, is that data is made powerful by context, and you need to keep it together, preserve the relationships in your data storage that do exist in the real world, right? Because that's what AI needs. Preserve the relationship, some kind of ontological mapping to reality, semantic conventions, and the data thing and the observability thing. If you can, and some people are like, "Ah, but it's a black box." No, you can read the trace. You can, yes, it's somewhat non-deterministic, but you're not exempted from trying to understand it if you're
Right.
trying to make it better.
Yeah. And I think one of the things is like people are bad at observability.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
I mean, that's the point. Like, I mean, if you go back to some of the stuff you've written in the past, and this, I was reading it, and I think one of the things that came out was that it's not natural for, like, humans can observe stuff, but we are not good at observing stuff that's breaking all the time and like being at anticipating patterns. So you want to develop that a little bit? Yeah.
I think historically this has been kind of it's a running joke in SRE that everyone in SRE, has ADHD, like, almost literally. And everyone in SRE is someone who, through personality or training or both, immediately looks at what will fail. It's just like, you show me a cool idea, and I'm like, "Ah, this is going to fail," and makes this really fun at parties. Like, there are a lot of people who find talking to SREs about their ideas deeply frustrating, and I have really had to personality retrain, transplant myself a bit because it's just not always helpful. Um, but yeah, we don't, as human beings, most people don't immediately focus on, "Okay, how is this gonna break? What can I anticipate?" And so forth. And there's been quite a feedback loop in the past because people didn't actually have the tools to do that well. So even if you did anticipate and you did instrument and you all these things, if all you had was dashboards and aggregates, there's kind of no point, you know, because you couldn't really, you could tell if something really big and bad happened, but you couldn't understand precisely the impact of your change. And one of the reasons that, a quote I've been trotting out a lot lately is that AI is like alcohol. It
No.
is both the cause of and solution to most of life's problems,
That's well
right?
said. Yeah.
I would say that one of the eat your vegetables messages that I've been seeing for like 15 years is instrument your code as you write it, commit your code, then go look at your instrumentation to close the loop, understand it, right? But if you instrument your code and you go and you look at it and all you have are like, okay, 99.8, you know, with AI, we now have the ability to auto instrument using OTel and open source patterns, it's better than we can do ourselves, and build that loop into our code so that it can come in and tell us, "Oh, that endpoint that you shipped yesterday, errors are super elevated for that." It can become a conversation with your code, and if you use something like Honeycomb, this is not true of 3 pillars, just to be clear, but you can do this with precision. And so, like, what I am excited about with agents in particular is the ability to bake this loop into the product and into your workflow so that uh, e I get so excited. Mouth not as fast as brain. But, like, you ship a diff, right? You have that intent in your head. This is the intent you have. Okay, so you generate code. You generate tests, right? test the intent. Cool. You deploy to production where you have things like progressive deployments and feature flags so you can test safely in production. So then your agent goes and looks precisely at the change that you made. What is your intent? What do you expect to happen? What is the comparison to baseline on all the dimensions? And it can let you know, looks good. Okay, let's roll it out to a 10% of hosts, right? And at every step that can, is it doing what I expected it to do? Does anything else, and so you can promote it. And then imagine, that whole thing about never deploy on a Friday, you're abusing your teams if you blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that is a trope if you if there's no if you can't understand, if you can't see the impact of your change, right? But if you can see it precisely, if you have confidence that you can see the delta, you in order to move swiftly, you have to have confidence. Confidence is what allows you to move swiftly. So anyway, agents, imagine you just shift you you just shipped a little feature, right? And your little agent's gonna check up on it and let you know if something bad happens precisely. Because even if it's, say you're running a system that's shipping a million requests per second, and this change that you shipped is maybe 50 requests per second, right? It's drowned out in big dashboards. But if you have precision tools, you can compare that to, the combination of the build ID, the feature flag, the change you make compared to baseline.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. And then imagine that the change that you shipped was something more like a caching change.
Right.
Well, that might not surface for weeks,
Yeah.
months.
Agree. Wait, cache
But you
cache
should
is
have your little agent check back up on it and be like, "Oh, this is a caching thing. Well, you should check up on this for a long time and look for these things?"
right. Yeah.
I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. And I think what you said is that's the vision that excites me because I am bad at observability, right? I don't know if you know the four temperaments. I am a sanguine. I don't think about risk. I think about jumping into things, right? So
Oh,
I'm
love
that
it.
guy. So I need a pessimistic person with me saying that this is what could go wrong. So from that point of view, when I see a lot of people developing stuff, what you said with what you're doing with Honeycomb, to look at with precision that hey, this is what we will do. You have somebody sitting with you looking at what you're doing and looking at that impact of that small little change, and it has the context too. So that's the cool part. That's what excites me about what you guys are building.
And instead of slowing you down, which I acknowledge that if you're a software engineer using the standard tool stack, eating your vegetables could easily double, triple, quadruple the amount of time it takes you to do your job, right? That's there are a few exceptional teams out there with the amount of engineering discipline and leadership and that have never that but for the most part it's been out of reach for most people. And now I feel like it's finally becoming accessible to the median engineering team to bake these things in to reduce the risk, to improve the precision so that, honestly, this is what made me finally get on AI train is just this excitement about this is our first chance to bring our engineering values to the mainstream.
Yeah. No, I'm excited. I'm excited about all of that. And I think people are underestimating the role of observability in the future.
100%.
Like
100%.
without a doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, just replace observability with validation.
Yes.
like,
That's the
like
outcome, right? Yeah.
outcome engineering.
Yes.
By the way, my friend Corey Andreka made this amazing site. O16G stands for outcome engineering. It
Nice.
is phenomenal. It's like it's like Martin Luther just, stapling it to the church door. It's about outcomes. And in order to track that intent, you have to be able to validate the outcome. That's observability.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so as we like, I would love to understand some of the things that you can help in the listeners' minds, right? What do you think are a few things that you have seen that people do as a pattern that you feel they should like start to change now with where things are going? You can, there's no, you can even chill and say Honeycomb, go try this out, look at this blog and things like that. Don't worry about that. But I think that'll be great for you to kind of help people understand, because you, in many ways, you're like the observability queen I'm talking to right now. So it'll be great for us to kind of know and learn from you. So yeah.
Oh, thank you. That's very sweet. Um, I think I will shill a little bit. And I do think that people, yes, obviously Honeycomb, is there's a second generation of observability tools. I called it Observability 2.0 for a while, and I'm feeling very embarrassed about that. It's like the most hackneyed. But like the wide structured events, single source of truth instead of the three pillars. It is so clear to me that the three pillars days are numbered, no matter how many tens of millions of dollars of marketing and sales, but like it just doesn't work at a certain. People should absolutely check out Honeycomb. Um, I If they aren't using open telemetry, adopt open telemetry because it is vendor neutral. It makes it so much. Will Larson once said, "The sole scalable solution to technical debt is migrations." And migrations are very hard if you've never done them or you don't do them a lot, but it's a muscle that you can build, you know? And when it comes to your observability tooling, you need to invest in the ability to because things are changing fast, and you do not want to be stuck on the vendor that you were using 20 years ago, because if you are, or even 10 years ago, you're probably using the wrong thing. It's Gartner actually said in our last call, I don't think this is online anymore, sadly. They were like, observability is one of the only categories where there is no single dominant player for more than 20 years,
Hmm.
ever. Like it always
Keeps
changes because it
changing.
has
Yeah,
to
it's a good
change
point.
with
Yeah.
the tech, right? Kind of makes
Yeah.
sense. Hotel is kind of the lock in the door, I think, that opens the ability to migrate, which is what gives you optionality, which is what gives you leverage in your budget conversations. The other thing that I will shill is the second. I I appreciate the nice things you said about the first edition of the book. I'm not that proud of the first. It took us 3.5 years, and there was at no point that I was like, "This is a great book. Ship it." It was more like, "It's been 3 years. I can't keep doing this. I can't. I can't even look at it. What if you're just print it? Like I can't even read. That was the vibe." Um, I feel differently about the second edition. I We have some incredible guest authors. Some of the sharp I mean, Matt Klein writing about mobile and front end, Jeremy Morel writing about instrumentation. Um, some of our direct competitor, ClickHouse has a great chapter about how to use observability, build a ClickHouse stack for observability. Like I my dog in this fight is not Honeycomb. It is the old ways don't work, y'all. You don't have to buy Honeycomb, but you should be thinking about the sort of Ollie 2.0 model. Anyway, and my particular section of the book, I got together with the co-authors last June, and I pitched them on, all right, let's add a new section to the book, part 6, observability governance, written for observability engineering teams, on the kinds of topics that they struggle with, cost control and migrations and tooling and all this stuff. And from June, July, August, September, I wrote. I was about done. And I'm like struggling with the last chapter on buying software. And that's when I wrote a blog post. And I'm like, hey, internet, I could use some help. And I asked people to email me their stories about buying software, choosing tools, just in general. And the internet responded. I got I got many, 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 many emails, and my progress in writing ground to a complete halt. And for over 6 weeks, I was just like staring at drafts. And a week before Thanksgiving, I was up late, just kind of around with the emails using Cloud, like, what are the themes? And it hit me. Everything I had written was wrong. Probably useless. I mean, do observability teams need advice? Yes. Who does? who the hell doesn't need help, right? Of course they need help. But it wasn't gonna do any good because all these emails I was getting from people were describing a terminally up buying process from the top down. CTOs, VPs, SVPs, distinguished engineers, principal engineers, directors, staff engineers, observability teams, no shared idea of what observability is, should be, what problem it's trying to solve, what problem it should be trying to solve, whether, and it just like no shared context. And so like just the stories of pain. I an engineering org that spent 6 months doing all these POCs came to a very strong conclusion, sent the contract off, and one of the losers' CEOs called up their CEO, and he overruled them. Didn't even talk to them, didn't consult with them, just, like, signed a different contract, and again and less dramatically, I mean, I I think that inertia, just, like, it's paralyzing. So much has changed. And it's become so do you realize most people don't realize this, but observability is now typically the second highest cost behind cloud spend. When it comes to tools or spending on software, there's cloud, and then there's observability, and observability is usually 20 to 30% of the overall infrastructure bill. It's astronomical, right? And yet 15 years ago, it was 50K. It was it was a it was an ops tool, cost center, rolled up to the CIO. So things have changed, right? Okay, so I get all these emails. I realize what I've written is not actually helpful, and right before Thanksgiving, I kind of had my Saul on the road to Damascus, the sort of conversion moment, and so or the last 3.5 months, I threw everything out and I rewrote it from scratch. And now my section of the book is still called Observability Governance, but it opens it's for technical decision makers from the top down, right? So it starts with like an open letter to CTOs being like, observability is not so 2019, so pre-AI. It's actually it's how your team, your organization learns. And all of your AI initiatives are backed up behind. The blocker is no longer writing code, it's understanding code and
Exactly.
learning from it.
Yeah.
And so
That's pretty prudent, actually.
yeah, so we start with the open and then because every technical term is so overloaded with sales and marketing bullshit now, the next couple chapters we talk about, um, we just use systems thinking terms, right? Feedback loops. Feedback loops can be amplifying, that's what causes change, or they can be balancing, which is what causes, stability. But observability is the thing that connects cause and effect to create a loop. No observability, no loop, no feedback loop. And if that observability is laggy, lossy, delayed, uh, then your balancing loops, instead of causing stability, they either freeze up or they oscillate.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
And without observability, they're not positive loops, they're doom spirals.
No, what I was going to say was I never thought about it like this, but when you said an open letter to the CEOs, I think it's very important for this kind of idea to rise up in the minds of the not just
I think
leadership.
so.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think so.
yeah, because this is tied to the outcomes that you're driving, right? It's tied to your customer experience. It's tied to the customer experience and then drives revenue. So people don't think like that, but it's good that you did that shift.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. There is this perception. One of the problems with technical executives is that it's really hard to outgrow the things that you learned when you were hands-on.
Mm.
You know, I feel this myself all the time. It's like the that when I was in the thick of it at Parse, right, 10, 15 years ago, I know that so deeply. And the stuff that I haven't been hands-on with the past few years, I know a lot less deeply, right? And most CTOs and VPs, when they were hands-on, They had monitoring and logging, and it was an ops tool, and it was a cost center, and it was related to reliability and outages and incidents. But which is important. All that stuff is important. But the developer feedback loop is about building and creating value and learning. Like these are two different the ops feedback loop and the developer feedback loop are two different things. And observability for developers is right in the critical path of building and understanding and serving your users.
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. And well said, actually. And these are like, I think we don't think about these things enough because we are just so focused on, let me build my feature. Okay, now this feature
Everyone's
needs to
overloaded.
scale. Yeah, yeah.
Everyone's overloaded.
Right,
And
right.
so, yeah, I tried to make it as simple as I possibly could, just simple and intuitive and vendor neutral. So that's what I'm shilling.
Yeah, no, it's very cool. I mean, it's awesome. Like, for everyone listening in, so the two things that you want, you go check out Honeycomb, obviously, some of the cool things that Chat has written. I believe you have a pretty active Twitter and Substack too. So go check that out. We'll put that in with the post that we do. And obviously, go check out the Observability Engineering part one if you want to, but according to Charity, part two is much more cooler. So go check that out. Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, Charity. I mean, as we leave, like I now let's just talk about. I think you brought this up, and I always love talking to veterans in the industry. It's sort of like, what's your advice to junior engineers, right? Like, uh, it'll be good for you to spray some of those thoughts out as well, and for those young people who are listening, from people like Charity, like what is it that they should be focused on learning, and what should be their mental model?
I really struggle with how to give advice to young people because the world was so different when I was, 17, 22. I honestly feel like the most useful and relevant advice rarely comes from people who are this far ahead of you. It's usually from people who are in your shoes 5 years ago.
Makes sense.
And Kent Beck has written some amazing things about how junior engineers are going to be more AI natives than we are, right? But to get those skills, it depends on people being willing to hire them. So instead of me trying to give any advice to junior engineers and screwing it up, I'm just going to send them empathy and good vibes and hopes. And instead, I'm going to say a different thing, which is every company I know of that is invested into hiring and training junior engineers over the past couple years has, number one, not regretted it. They have been very grateful, like vocally happy about it. And number two, it has not come from the top down. It has been championed bottom up by other engineers, by senior engineers, staff engineers, usually not even managers, but like senior engineers and staff engineers who are like, we are cannibalizing our future by not investing in the next generation. I will personally take on the responsibility of mentoring these kids, interviewing them, give me some, so I would say if you're a senior IC, don't feel like you have no power because you have power and you might be the only one who will make this happen.
Yeah, very cool. Well said. No, I have more positive perspective, like similar to what you said. Like, I think it's more incumbent on the veterans to kind of look at the way the tech is going to shape the world, and always remember that it's we all learn from somebody's blogs, we all learn from somebody's Stack Overflow, and we all learn from places like that, and that's the kind of culture that we experience, so we should kind of remember that in as we progress.
100% I would echo that. It is once you've seen what good looks like, it seems obvious.
Yeah, yes.
Obvious and intuitive. It's obvious that if you ship code in 15 minutes, it's obviously this is easier, right? Uh, it's not obvious to people who haven't seen it. And it often looks harder and out of reach, right? So I think humility is called for. I think empathy is called for. And I think just trying to reach people where they're at instead of asking them to try and reach you where you're at.
Well said. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Charity, for coming on. It was such a pleasure talking to you about so many different things, especially like I really loved your perspective on like the way AI observability has kind of shaped the world and also how executives need to start thinking about this not as an afterthought. So I really appreciate that. And for all the listeners, go check out Charity, her company, Honeycomb. And the book that it's coming out. Is it already out or is it coming out in
The Dead Tree version will be out in June.
June?
Preview chapters are coming out in O'Reilly and the Honeycomb blog between now and then.
Very cool. Yeah, so check it out, and we'll post all the links in the podcast description as well. So thank you everyone for joining us once again. Appreciate it, and Charity, thank you once again.
Thanks.